Hi, I'm Dr. Mike, and this is NFGeeks. Well, this video is an Ask Dr. Mike video on the Facebook forum for NFGeeks. People post questions for me to answer in a response video, and whatever question that gets the most likes wins. And this question is posted by Wayne Suji, and it's an interesting question. It's about something that that I deal with all the time, so I'm very motivated to answer it. And it's about mistyping. So here's this question. If somebody mistypes themselves through self-typing and they are convinced that they are that type, what are the most obvious signs that they have their type wrong? And if they insist that knowing their type has been beneficial to them, are they in denial? If so, how might they be hurting themselves or others by insisting their type is that they're a type that they're not? There we go. This is a good one because this is very close to home. The first thing has to be said, okay, right off the bat, has to be said is that this whole thing about people being a type that they're not and talking about themselves being a type that they're not has a lot to do with the self-typing through the functions. And in fact, most of the time when this happens, the self-typing through the functions is present. Okay, and to be honest, if it's not their own self-typing, someone else typed them through the functions. But most of the time, I have seen the person has typed themselves using the functions, and that has resulted in the wrong type. Okay, now the reason for that, other than the fact that this is just a bad system, ultimately the functions are too abstract to be used in this way. Okay, I think they're too abstract to be used with another person, but let alone the self. But they're certainly too abstract to use in the self. Okay. Also, because they're so abstract and not necessarily connected to reality in that way, without knowing the greater type or whatever, they can be used to justify any type. And that's what happens. Okay, that's why this works. The functions are used to justify whatever type the person wants or the person needs to be. Okay, and that's important in this whole discussion that I'm going to have, because one of the things that's underneath this that we don't usually talk about, or I don't usually talk about regarding the functions, is this problem is shame. Okay, shame is the feeling of of having the world or society, whatever, looking upon you and you being bad in the eyes of everybody else. Okay, that it's always very other oriented in that sense. But and we learn shame very early, toddler is when we learn to be ashamed of ourselves. And shame is at the core of that, because the reason why you want to go, or why someone would want to go and be a certain type, is because they want to be a certain type, or they don't want to be another type. And so you want to choose your type. Okay, and what's driving all that is shame, because there's a part of you that you don't like. And it's not just that you don't like it, you think it's bad and you don't want to connect it to your identity, and you don't want anybody else to know that this bad thing is you. Okay, and that comes from shame. So worrying about people seeing this, whatever, that's shame. Okay, and so you're ashamed of these various parts of yourself, and you don't want them to be connected to your identity, because you've misconstrued type with identity. But it doesn't matter, it's out there, you don't want to know. So you want to be able to choose your types, and that's a way of compensating and hiding for the things that you have shame over. Okay, and also denying that you're this other type, which you're also ashamed of because it connects to your actual self. So shame is all involved here, and the use of the functions through typing of the self allows the shame to work its way into making the wrong choice. And that's why working the functions this way to self-typing doesn't work, because it allows shame to manipulate the whole thing, and then you are trying to compensate for those bad parts and control that shame, relieve the anxiety of shame by choosing the type that you think you would want to be, or at least hides the type you actually are, or whatever. That's why this whole thing is a mess. Okay, so Typing through the functions makes that whole thing worse. It doesn't help a person find anything. It keeps a person locked into the shame and locked into a disconnected self. Okay, so this whole thing is because of typing the self through the functions. Big mess. All right. So now, what are the signs of it? Okay, because that's what Wayne is asking. There are three. Okay. The first one is this over-the-top berating defense that they are that type. Okay. The more hardcore that fighting is, the less likely it is that they are actually that type. And on some level, they know. Okay. Because why? Why are they fighting? Well, it's breaking through the barrier, and then if we break through this barrier of the type, then we will see the parts they're ashamed of. So they got to keep that barrier up, okay? And that's actually a common denominator through this whole video about this problem with people who have this issue with typing themselves wrong, is that so that's why they fight it. The more you say something, the stronger and stronger they get, because if they aren't that type, then whatever it is they're ashamed of themselves for will be revealed. Okay, because this thing is a compensating, defense mechanism. That type, whatever type that they've chosen. So the more they fight, like really get into it, that is a sure sign. I always think of that. If it goes on the forum, if it goes on longer than one sentence, I already got the red flag up. I'm already like, oh no, here we go. More than one post, oh, forget it. Yeah, we're there. And the reason why I say that is people who have their type down, you know what I mean? They are their right type. They know their type. They've accepted their type. They don't do that. And not just me, but other people don't do that. I'll speak of myself. I've talked about this a bunch of times. People every now and then tell me I'm an INFJ. And some of them aren't trolls. Some of them mean it, that I'm an INFJ. And now that to me is ludicrous. I seem pretty obviously an ENFP, and to everyone else I seem like an ENFP. I feel very solid that I am an ENFP, and I'm okay with it, and I've incorporated it and I accept it, obviously, NFGeeks. So when somebody says to me, Mike, you're an INFJ, or Mike, you're not an ENFP, maybe I'll respond with one sentence, okay? No, I'm not, I'm an ENFP. Or I may respond with a second sentence like, okay, that's stupid. But that's it, really. I'm not gonna fight, because I don't have to fight, because I feel fine about being being an ENFP. I'm okay with it. I've settled into it, and I accept it, and I feel good. So people who have been typed correctly and feel secure in their type don't fight it. Okay, and the more they fight it, the more likely they're not typed correctly, because the more likely unconsciously they know that. Okay, even though they have this whole sort of rational thing, no, it's me, I'm this type because I have FE, whatever. They have that all going on in their head. The more they fight, the more irrational they get, the more, the idea that they are not that type is kind of, hitting something. Hitting a nerve. Maybe I'm not this thing, and then maybe I'm this other thing that I hate, or maybe if I switch types, then all the things I'm ashamed about will come out, whether they relate to type or not. Okay? So how hard they hit back is a surefire sign of what's going on with them. The second one, and these things, obviously relate, is when they attribute behaviors or thought processes or values or orientations that are not the type they say they are to their type, because those are the things that they actually do. So a good example, and this happens all the time, an NF will think they are an NT, but they'll be acting in NF ways. And instead of thinking about the fact that maybe they're an NF and not an NT, they'll attribute all these NF things to being an NT. Yes, an NT can love crystals too, and and all this. Jared spoke about that stuff. We were sort of chuckling about it in the videos we did together. But he's got a point there, and I agree actually, and that's a surefire sign if somebody's been mistyped and they've mistyped themselves. If they're unwilling to let go. First of all, they're just unwilling to let go of the fact that, gee, if you're doing all these things that are like an NF, maybe you're not an NT, and vice versa. That's a sure sign of it. And also, a sure sign of that is that there are certain things, and this is what Jared was getting at too, there are certain behaviors, values, thought processes that are that are really kind of contained within a certain temperament or type, and are not really contained in another temperament or type. And it seems a little ludicrous to say that they all can. I mean, I realize intellectually we have to say things like, well, it's possible. It's possible an NT will be into crystals and things like that. Sure, it is possible. Lots of things are possible. But I mean, is it really probable? That's what he was getting at, and I'm getting at too. Is it probable? It's not probable. And the more that piles on, you know what I mean? The more you pile on NF, if you're calling yourself an NT, and the more and more NF stuff you pile on, then, you're kind of an NF, and not an NT. And NTs do this too. NTs, say they're NFs and they pile on NT things. Yes, this does happen. Because I've seen both sides of that. So that is a very important sign. If they're having a bunch of behaviors and thoughts and orientations, okay, it doesn't have, any one thing isn't necessarily a sign that you got your type wrong necessarily. But if there's a whole cluster of things that are definitely a part of one temperament or type, and you have them, and you're doing them, then it's unlikely, that you're that type or temperament. I mean, it's just unlikely. So, two things. One, they fight. Okay, they fight very hard when you tell them they're not their type, and they get really sort of angry and come at you. Or they attribute a whole bunch of behaviors, thoughts, feelings, values, ways of being that are clearly part of another type or temperament as being part of the type or temperament they say they are. Okay. And they get mad about that too. There's also anger if you point that out to them, like, well, no, really, the NFs don't do that, NTs don't do that, really, for the most part. They get mad. All right. Now, and that's a sure sign, getting angry. Now, okay, so is it beneficial to them if they do this? No, it is not beneficial. Are they in denial? Yes, they are very much in denial because the type they've chosen is a defense mechanism. Okay, to block whatever shame they're feeling. Okay, that's why they chose it. It's to block. So yeah, it's about denial of the self and whatever it is. Is it beneficial? And how are they hurt? Is it beneficial? No. Are they hurting themselves? Yes, because they're going to be making decisions based on a type that they're not, and everything's going to come out wrong. They're going to pick career paths that are not in the best interest for them. Okay, they're going to get into arguments with people. Okay, that they're not going to make sense of. They're going to screw up relationships. Okay, because they're going to be assuming that they're acting out this type, and they're really going to have behaviors of the type they actually are. And that's another thing. They'll say that they have all the behaviors of the type they think they are. They've memorized it, but when they act, they don't have any of those. Okay, they have all the behaviors of some other type or some other temperament. So believing in it and still acting on it, so if you think and this is a common one, if you're an INFJ and you think you're an INTJ, okay, and you make INTJ choices, knowing on what you know about INTJ, that's going to lead you down wrong paths. It's not every path is going to be wrong, but it's going to trip you up. Okay, it's going to trip you up in relationships with people. It's going to be a disaster. Okay. So yes, they're absolutely hurting themselves because they're going to make all the wrong choices. Okay, more or less. Whether it's people, relationships, work, it's going to make the wrong choices. So it can't possibly be beneficial, and they are in denial. So so that's my answer. And again, just the last thing to get back to, this is because of self-typing through the functions. Okay, people who don't use this method, that doesn't happen. They don't have this problem. Okay, so the real way to stop this from happening is to stop doing that, stop encouraging others to do that. Okay, all right, so that's it. As always, thank you very much for watching. Come join the fun on the NFGeeks Facebook forum. On the forum, you can win a free MBTI typing by me, Dr. Mike. We have a lottery once a week, so every week someone new gets to have a free typing lottery. That could be you if you join up. And I also provide typing services myself. I'm a Myers-Briggs practitioner, and for $50 I will type you and tell you what your personality type is. Cheapest price on the internet for that kind of stuff. Quality time with Dr. Mike. So 2 ways you can be typed correctly. So there's that, and follow NFGeeks on Twitter and Tumblr, and as always, it's happening. Except typing yourself with the functions, that's not happening.